It was a typical August night, humid and thick with the anticipation of an approaching storm. The kind of night where the air feels like it's pressing down on you, and you can practically smell the electricity building in the atmosphere. The local news had warned about the storm all day long, and by the time the first rumbles of thunder rolled across the sky, the horizon had turned an ominous shade of deep gray. I was 14 at the time, and it was my first night staying home alone overnight. My parents had gone out of town for a wedding, leaving me strict instructions: no leaving the house, no guests, and definitely no wandering outside. I wasn't too worried about it. I'd spent time home alone before, but never overnight. To be honest, I was kind of excited. The freedom was intoxicating. I could stay up as late as I wanted, binge watch whatever I wanted, and game on the big TV in the living room without anyone telling me to turn it off. As the evening wore on, the storm started to close in. The first real crack of thunder hit just as I was settling in with my gaming console. The rain had started up, a gentle patter at first, but within minutes, it was pounding against the windows and sheets. Lightning lit up the sky, illuminating the living room in stark flashes that made everything feel a little too real, like I was the main character in one of the horror games I'd been playing earlier. It was a little past 10 p.m. when the doorbell rang. At first, I thought I imagined it. The sound had been faint, barely audible over the roar of the storm. I paused my game and listened. For a moment, there was nothing, just the relentless hammering of the rain and the distant rumble of thunder. Then it rang again, louder this time, more urgent. I felt a prickle of unease crawl up my spine. Who would be at my door this late, especially in the middle of a storm like this? I hadn't heard a car pull up, and the street outside had been eerily empty when I looked out earlier. Cautiously, I grabbed the TV remote and muted the sound, straining my ears for any other noise. The house was still, except for the rain. I slowly made my way to the front door, my heart thudding in my chest. The doorbell rang a third time just as I reached it. I took a deep breath and peeked through the small frosted window at the top of the door. But there was no one there. The front porch was empty, and the street was dark, save for the occasional flicker of lightning. I hesitated, my hand hovering over the door handle. Maybe it was a prank, some neighborhood kid messing around in the storm. But deep down, something didn't feel right. The storm was too severe for anyone to be casually wandering around outside. "Who is it?" I called out, my voice wavering slightly. There was a pause, and for a moment, I thought maybe whoever had been at the door was gone. But then, a man's voice called back, muffled by the door and the rain. "I need to use your phone. My car broke down." Every instinct in me screamed not to open the door. It was late, and the weather was awful. There hadn't been any cars outside, not even parked on the curb. I glanced down at the hallway table, where my phone sat charging. Why couldn't he just use his own phone? "I'm sorry, I can't help you," I replied, my voice firm but shaky. There was a brief silence, and then the man knocked harder, the sound of his fist pounding against the wood echoing through the house. "Please, just let me in for a minute. I just need to make one call." I took a step back from the door, my mind racing. He didn't sound desperate. He sounded angry, frustrated. I backed up into the hallway, grabbing my phone and quickly texting my friend Cody, who I had been playing games with earlier. My hand shook as I typed. "There's a guy at my door. He says his car broke down. I don't know what to do." Cody's response was quick. "Don't open the door. Just call the cops." I was about to dial when I heard a noise from the back of the house, a loud crash. My blood ran cold. My first thought was that the man had found another way in, and I bolted down the hallway, adrenaline surging through me. The kitchen door, the one leading to the backyard, was wide open, the rain whipping in through the shattered glass. A tall, shadowy figure stood in the doorway, silhouetted against the storm. My breath caught in my throat. He was inside. I turned and ran. My mind was racing, trying to think of where to hide. I could hear his footsteps squelching across the wet floor as he entered the house. I darted upstairs, my legs burning as I took the steps two at a time. My parents' bedroom was at the end of the hallway, and I threw myself inside, slamming the door behind me. I locked it, my hands trembling, and scrambled under the bed, clutching my phone to my chest. My heart was pounding so loudly, I thought it would give me away. I tried to steady my breathing, tried to listen for any sound over the storm. For a moment, there was nothing, just the distant roar of the rain and the occasional rumble of thunder. Then, I heard it. His voice, low and mocking, calling from the hallway. I know you're in here. Why don't you come out? We can talk." I stifled a sob, covering my mouth with my hand. The door handle rattled, and then the pounding began again, hard and deliberate. Each thud sent a jolt of terror through me as the door started to splinter under the force of his blows. He was going to break it down. I had no choice. I crawled out from under the bed and looked to the window. It was my only escape. I threw it open, the rain immediately soaking me as I climbed onto the roof. The shingles were slick under my hands and feet, but I managed to shimmy down the drain pipe, my hands scraping against the rough metal. My feet hit the ground, and I didn't stop. I ran through the backyard, through the rain, not daring to look back. The storm raged on around me, but all I could hear was the blood rushing in my ears, my pulse pounding as I raced toward the neighbor's house. My lungs burned, but I kept going, the fear propelling me forward. When I reached Mr. Johnson's house, I pounded on the door, screaming for help. He opened it, his face pale with shock, and I collapsed into his arms, trembling uncontrollably. The police arrived not long after. They found the back door shattered and muddy footprints throughout the house. But the man was gone. There was no sign of him anywhere. They searched the neighborhood, questioned the few people who lived nearby, but no one had seen him. He'd vanished just as quickly as he'd appeared. For months after that night, I couldn't sleep. Every time the wind howled or the rain tapped against my window, I would lie awake, waiting for the sound of footsteps, waiting for the doorbell to ring again. It never did. But sometimes, when a storm rolls in late at night, I still feel that same sense of unease, like he's out there, somewhere, waiting. Maybe next time he won't knock. I was 16 when I experienced a night that would change my life forever. My parents had gone out of town for the weekend, attending a family wedding in another state. Since I had school on Monday, and my finals were just around the corner, I stayed home. It wasn't my first time being alone overnight, but something about this weekend felt different from the start. The forecast warned of a powerful thunderstorm, expected to arrive by evening, and the sky had been growing darker and heavier with each passing hour. I actually like storms though. There was something calming about the sound of rain tapping against the windows, the low rumbles of thunder echoing in the distance. I had plans to make the most of the night. Horror movie marathon, snacks, and the house to myself. It seemed perfect. By 7 p.m., the storm had rolled in exactly as predicted. Heavy rain pelted the roof and windows, and flashes of lightning lit up the sky, followed by sharp cracks of thunder. I was nestled on the couch, a blanket wrapped around me, watching The Conjuring. Because what better way to enjoy a stormy night than with a horror movie? I was about halfway through the film when I heard it, a knock at the door. At first, I thought it might have been something falling outside, maybe a tree branch hitting the house in the wind. The storm was pretty intense by that point, with howling gusts rattling the windows. But then it came again, this time louder and unmistakably deliberate. I paused the movie, my body going tense. Who would be knocking on my door during a storm like this? I glanced at the clock. It was just after 10 p.m. My neighborhood was quiet, and most people would be indoors by now, especially with the weather being so awful. I stood up, a sense of unease creeping into my chest as I made my way toward the front door. I didn't want to seem paranoid, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I hesitated for a moment before peeking through the peephole. Nothing. The porch was empty, the rain slanting down in thick sheets. I frowned. Maybe it had been the wind after all. I turned to go back to the couch, trying to shake off the strange feeling settling in the pit of my stomach. But just as I took a step, the knock came again. This time, it was hard and urgent, rattling the door on its hinges. My heart leapt into my throat. I froze, staring at the door, every instinct telling me to leave it alone. But there was a part of me, a foolish, curious part, that felt like I had to know who or what was out there. I called out, my voice shaking slightly. "Who's there?" For a moment, there was nothing but the sound of the rain. I started to relax, thinking that maybe it really was just the wind, or maybe a neighbor caught in the storm who had already left. But then a voice, low and gravelly, came from the other side of the door. "I need to use your phone." Something about the voice was wrong. It was flat, emotionless, and it sent a cold shiver down my spine. I felt my pulse quicken as I backed away from the door. What kind of person wanders around in a storm like this, knocking on doors in the middle of the night? "I'm sorry," I called back, trying to keep my voice steady. "I can't help you." There was silence for a long moment, and I thought that would be the end of it. I waited, holding my breath. Maybe whoever it was would move on, realizing I wasn't going to open the door. But then the knocking came again, louder this time, more forceful. The door shook with each hit. My heart pounded in my chest as I backed farther into the hallway. "Please, let me in. I just need to use your phone," the voice said again, more insistent now. There was something unnatural about it, something that made my skin crawl. I grabbed my phone from the table and quickly dialed 911, whispering into the receiver as I backed away toward the stairs. The dispatcher's voice on the other end was calm, but I could hear the urgency in her tone as she assured me that officers were on their way. The knocking stopped abruptly. The sudden silence was even worse than the pounding had been. I stood frozen at the bottom of the stairs, listening, my heart hammering in my chest. I could hear nothing but the rain and wind outside. Then I heard it. Footsteps. Soft, deliberate footsteps, circling the house. My stomach dropped. The footsteps grew louder as they moved along the side of the house, crunching through the wet gravel in the side yard. My house had a wraparound porch, and whoever was outside seemed to be walking slowly, methodically, checking each window. I bolted upstairs, heart racing, and locked myself in my bedroom. My hands were shaking as I checked the windows, making sure they were securely fastened. I could hear the footsteps outside, moving toward the back of the house now. They were slow, steady, like whoever it was wasn't in any kind of hurry, like they had all the time in the world. I crouched near the window, peering out into the backyard through the gap in the curtains. Lightning flashed, illuminating the yard for just a split second, and I saw him, a tall, thin figure standing just outside the back door. He was soaked from the rain, his face pale and gaunt, his eyes wide and staring straight up at my window. I gasped, stumbling backward, my heart pounding in my throat. He had seen me. His face was so strange, blank, emotionless, but with eyes that seemed too large for his face. They glowed unnaturally in the brief flashes of lightning, reflecting the light in a way that didn't seem human. I scrambled away from the window, trying to quiet my breathing. I dialed 911 again, my fingers trembling as I told the dispatcher that the man was in my backyard, that he had seen me. The dispatcher assured me again that officers were en route, but it would take time. My house was on the edge of town, and with the storm, everything was moving more slowly. I felt trapped, helpless, and every second that passed felt like an eternity. Suddenly, I heard a loud crash from downstairs, the back door. It sounded like it had been kicked in. Panic surged through me. He was inside. I ran into the closet, hiding behind the hanging clothes, and tried to stay as quiet as possible. My breath came in shallow, shaky gasps as I listened to the sounds of footsteps downstairs. They were slow and deliberate, like he was taking his time, searching the house. I heard him moving through the kitchen, opening cabinets, knocking things over. He wasn't just trying to find me, he was playing some kind of sick game. My mind raced. What did he want? Why me? I hadn't even opened the door. The footsteps grew louder as they moved toward the stairs. Each creak of the floorboards sent a fresh wave of terror through me. He was coming closer, step by step, as if he knew exactly where I was hiding. "Where are you?" His voice echoed through the house, calm and mocking. "I know you're here." I squeezed my eyes shut, praying he wouldn't find me. I could hear him moving through the hallway now, his boots thudding softly on the carpet. He stopped just outside my bedroom door. The door handle jiggled. Then there was a soft knock. I stifled a sob, covering my mouth with my hand. The door creaked open slowly, and I could hear his breathing, slow and steady, as he stepped into the room. I could see his shadow on the floor, his long legs and towering figure illuminated briefly by another flash of lightning. He moved closer to the closet, his footsteps soft, deliberate. I held my breath, my entire body trembling. Then I heard it, a sound outside, faint but growing louder. Sirens. The police were finally arriving. The man's footsteps stopped abruptly. He stood still for a moment, listening. I could feel the tension in the air, as if he was deciding what to do next. The sirens grew louder, and then, without warning, he turned and bolted out of the room, his heavy footsteps thundering down the stairs. I heard the back door slam as he fled into the storm. I stayed hidden in the closet until I heard the officers calling my name. When I finally emerged, I was shaking so badly I could barely stand. The police searched the house, but the man was gone. They found muddy footprints leading from the back door to the front, but no sign of forced entry at the front door. It was as if he had simply appeared and disappeared into the night. The officers told me I was lucky, but I didn't feel lucky. I felt haunted, like his glowing eyes were still watching me from the darkness. They never caught him. For weeks, I couldn't sleep. Every time a storm rolled in, I would lie awake, listening to the rain, waiting for that knock at the door, waiting for him to come back.